Tony's fight with Fei Long has begun. How will it end? Welcome to the Comicstorian Complete Story Series, where we take trade paperbacks and single issues and we break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then we read them dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Tony has been dealing with Fei Long and Orcus during the entire Fall of X event, and now it's time to see them fight it out. This is Invincible Iron Man 16, 17, and 18. I hope you enjoy.
The Stark Sentinels begin to surround him, but Tony is ready for the fight. Okay, if any Orcus pilots are actually on board these cute little Sentinels, now would be a time to eject. Tony shouts as he reaches out, punching one of the Sentinels, smashing it with one blow. He flies into the air, activating his chest cannon, spinning around, destroying several more Sentinels in the blast. He then continues to spin, blasting more Sentinels out of the sky with his arm cannons, smashing them between his fingers. Explosions rip through the air, and the Sentinels plummet out of the sky as they're destroyed. But the battle, it isn't over yet. More Sentinels begin to swarm him, and Tony looks up as Fei Long enters the fight with his personal armor. Hey, Fei Long, have you come to surrender for your crimes? Fat chats, Tony, but I'm impressed at what you've managed to hide from me. I'm gonna cut you out of that armor, and then you'll die by my hand. The Sentinels swarm around Tony, ripping at his armor, but he spins to the ground, knocking and smashing the Sentinels away. Tony knows that Fei Long is smart, but he is also prideful. All right, Fei Long, let's see what your ground game is like. What's it going to be? You gonna come out and face me, or are you gonna wait until I scrap every one of your toys? Tony asks as he flies out in the Mark 73 armor, beginning to blast at the Sentinels. The Sentinel Buster goes onto autopilot, still smashing through the Sentinels as Tony continues to work, but Fei Long isn't taking the bait, still hovering over the battlefield. Tony, what are you doing? You could have joined Orcus. Now I have to kill you in this godforsaken desert! Fei Long calls out, firing a blast that clips Tony in the Mark 73, throwing him to the ground. The blasts were extra powerful, and Fei Long moved in for the kill, but the Sentinel Buster reaches out, grabbing a hold of him. You are worse than useless, Stark! You were maintaining a rotten, corrupt, dangerous world, and Orcus needed to cut away at your infection! Fei Long bellows, but Tony recovers, flying back inside of the Sentinel Buster. And that's when Fei Long has a plan. Even the strongest armors have a weak point, Tony, Fei Long calls as he punches through the chest piece, smashing the armor's power source. I let you live because I thought it was funny. You crashing on Fisk's couch, but I'm not laughing anymore. The Sentinel Buster powers it down, crashing to its knees before falling to the ground, defeated. Fei Long begins to circle, preparing to go in for the kill. Moments later, Tony opens his eyes, finding himself wrapped in the Sentinel Buster's cables, smoke swirling around him. Where am I? He gasps, struggling against the cables as the memory of the battle comes back to him. Oh yeah, that was fun. So much fun. Breaking free, he tumbles to the ground and hits the Avengers' comms, trying to get word out to anyone else, but there is no reply. Pushing his way through the destruction of the Sentinel Buster, he suddenly stops short, his eyes falling upon both his mother and his stepmother, who are enjoying tea together. He asks them what's going on. The women merely point him through the next opening, telling him to ask his father. And the next chamber of the suit, now filled with fluids, Tony finds Wei, who's gasping through the blood in his mouth, blaming Tony for his death. Hands reach out of the liquid, grabbing him, pulling him down, and Tony looks around and sees that the others that have died, who pull him in deeper and deeper into the waters. The light begins to fade, and Tony can feel himself slipping away. But that's when something breaks him free of the water, and he stares up in shock as Magneto lifts him up. Tony Stark, how pitiful that you are what passes as a large-minded human, Magneto says, pointing out that Tony was so afraid of what the mutants could do that he began to build weapons that were used against them. The first time I heard your name, you were attacking a military base. Magneto flings him across the room. And I face soldiers with weapons bearing your name. Magneto reminds him, holding up his hand, letting the metal of the Sentinel Buster wrap around Tony, suffocating him. The world doesn't need arms merchants. That is my judgment. Magneto growls as all goes black. But a voice is calling to Tony, and he opens up his eyes to see his father standing over him, helping him up. Tony looks down to see that he is wearing his original armor. Dad, don't judge this armor. I built better ones, Tony says as he pulls off the helmet. And then Howard slaps him on the shoulder, telling him how impressive the suit is since Tony built it in a cave. But the ground gives way beneath Tony's feet and he tumbles away. He asks his father for help, but Howard's face has turned undead. "I can't. I died in a car wreck," Howard says as the earth continues to collapse around Tony Stark. Finally, Tony opens up his eyes, the Buster armor sparking around him from the destruction, and he stumbles away to see that the reactor is leaking. Suddenly, he's cracked from behind, and when he looks up, Fei Long is standing over him with a piece of rebar. "My respect for you grows, Stark. There's nowhere on Earth that you can hide the construction of a Sentinel Buster, so you went to the stars," Fei Long says with a nod, and Tony whirls, blasting him with his arm cannon. "My contempt for you is bottomless. This is for my friend Zhong Wei," Tony snaps as Fei Long is launched across the room. Tony launches after him, and Fei Long tries to hit him with a mouth blast, but the Mysterium armor is able to withstand it as Tony punches him again. "And this is for my old neighbor, Mariel Marcus." He grabs Fei Long, hitting him again and again. "She had family. This is for all of the lies that you've ruined." Tony shouts with rage, bloodied. Fei Long looks up at him. "You're right. Of course I failed." He gasps, and Tony holds up his arm cannon as it begins to glow. "I want you to do it. And before you do, there's something you need to know." Fei Long struggles, and Tony stares at him for a moment before dropping him to the ground, demanding that Fei Long shut down the rest of the Sentinels. But Fei Long shakes his head. "I can't. I made a terrible miscalculation. The humans in Orcus aren't calling the shots. The AI is. Nimrod, the Omega Sentinel. They want to kill us all. Mutants and humans alike." He motions to the army of Sentinels that are flying towards them. "None of these machines respond to my commands, Stark. It seems that there are two Orcus organizations all along. One that I dominated, and one that secretly dominated me." Tony turns away, reaching out his thoughts to Emma, trying to warn her. Embroiled in the battle in New York, Emma quickly responds. "I was just about to reach out to you. I trust you realize that the humans in Orcus were nothing more than mere puppets." Tony nods, asking her if she can send backup, as there's more Sentinels than they had planned for. "Goodness, no! We're far too busy, darling. But I did ask someone to call on you," Emma says as she turns back to the battle. Tony and Fei Long look up as the backup arrives. "Well, I'll be damned," Tony whispers in surprise, as the metal around them begins to twist at the sheer power of the mutant. "Hello, Stark. Your wife sent me," Magneto says with a smile. Elsewhere, Rhodey is sitting in his cell, looking up as Orcus soldiers are suddenly around the corner raising their weapons. Reaching for the pendant that Tony gave him, he activates the Pym particles which allow the classic War Machine suit to grow. The Orcus soldiers open fire, but Rhodey jumps in the suit of armor. "Send Fei Long my regards," Rhodey says over the comms before barreling through the cell door and knocking the guards away. He turns to see the warden running away, having been completely unaware of what is happening, and Rhodey stomps forward, grabbing a hold of the warden, lifting him into the air. "Hello, warden. Be seeing you and your Orcus buddies in court when this is all finished," Rhodey growls before dropping the warden to the floor. Moments later, Rhodey in the War Machine armor is flying away, holding a car over his head with Living Laser and Sandman inside of it. "Hey, Tony, come in. Thanks for the old school suit, buddy. Just came in handy. I busted out of jail and I'll see you in the Alamo." But there's no answer. Back in the Outback, Fei Long and Tony are staring in surprise at Magneto's arrival. Fei Long is glaring at the mutant. "You stole Mars from me, Magneto!" he growls, and Magneto stares at him for a moment. "You know, I don't know who you are," Magneto says simply, and Fei Long's face falls in disbelief, his ego completely destroyed. Tony runs through their list of problems, pointing out that he's out of power and that there is an army of Sentinels that are now trying to kill both mutants and humans that have been unleashed on the world. "Yes, I met a few of them on my way in. They were formidable." Magneto agrees, and Fei Long points out that Nimrod had several secret Sentinel factories, so even he doesn't know how many Sentinels are actually out there. "If the machines are self-replicating, then that is our first priority," Magneto says, and Tony agrees, though they need to find them first. "I can solve that. I saw the factories on my screen before I was locked out of Orcus. They're all up here. What I can't do is power the behemoth," Fei Long says, motioning to the dead Buster armor around them. Magneto holds up his hand, power emanating off of it. "I can solve that," he says with a smile. Floating up, he begins to power up the Sentinel Buster, now piloted by both Tony and Fei Long. The first Sentinel factory that they destroy is South Wales, Australia. They then quickly move on to Tokyo, where they meet some of the resistance in front of the newly built Sentinels there. But the Sentinel Buster is more than a match for them. Everything is going well until Nimrod himself arrives, slamming into them and knocking the armor to the ground. Nice armor, Stark. It won't save you. Nimrod floats before Fei Long as the former member of Orcus faces him. Nimrod! If I wouldn't bend the knee to the mutants, what gives you the idea that I'd bend it to you? He fires a mouth blast at Nimrod, but the blast is easily deflected. You humans were the least interesting part of this conquest, and your feeble attempt to emulate that which you hate can't hurt any of my bodies, Nimrod says. Understand your frustration, Nimrod. Humans can disappoint. However, I have learned that we cannot continue on a path of destruction, Magneto says, using his power to lift the Sentinel Buster head into the air, slamming it into Nimrod, allowing it to meld around him and smother him. Nimrod attempts to gas Magneto with Terrigen Mist, but Tony arrives quickly to suppress the gas by transforming it into a liquid. They both watch as Nimrod continues to struggle against the Mysterium metal. Look, I've never met a machine that could kill me, and I've been involved in making a couple, but you're standing around an awful lot of metal. Magneto nods and fashions spears out of the Mysterium, which impales Nimrod with. Tony rushes forward, gripping the spear, sending bursts of energy through it, the energy ripping through Nimrod, bringing him to the ground, but Magneto isn't done. He senses the strangeness of Mysterium and calls upon it, allowing it to become almost liquid as it slides into Nimrod. Tony can do nothing but watch as the Mysterium tentacles begin to rip him apart from the inside. Well, this is unexpected. This body is corrupted, but I never exist in just one place. I will survive, Nimrod says as he is shut down. With the battle over, Magneto rises into the air, bidding Tony adieu and heading off to continue the war with Orcus and the Fall of X event. I've bound Fei Long. Good luck, Stark, Magneto says before he leaves. With a moment of peace, Tony looks over to where Fei Long is coming towards him, his hands wrapped in metal. So what now? Fei Long asks. Tony whirls, punching him, knocking Fei Long out, sending him to the ground. Now you start paying for the people that you murdered, Tony growls.
And there you have it. That was Invincible Iron Man 16, 17, and 18. Sadly, this was the last Iron Man audio that Benny had recorded. Don't worry, not the last audio in general. We still have a couple more of those. But I wanted to ask you guys if you would like me to conclude this series in his stead, or if you would prefer that we leave it here where Benny finished it. Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.